Was the Bible copied from ancient text regarding the biblical text and the ancient Sumerian tablets? I'll ask any Christian, I challenge any Christian, who wrote the Bible? I've never gotten the right answer since I've asked that question. Every time I ask them face to face, who wrote the Bible? They don't have no idea. They start telling me the apostles' names. You know, they start talking about Judas and John and all these. No, they wrote nothing. Those men were illiterate men. They couldn't even read or write. They were illiterate people. The Bible was written from 100 AD to 900 AD by Phoenicians, followers of Hermes, Thoth, the Atlantean priest king. That's who wrote the Bible. And they didn't write a Bible. What they did was they started copying ancient texts from all over the world, remnants of the Library of Alexandria, copying these ancient texts onto different parchment papers and stuffing them inside of vases and jars inside of caves. Over time, between 100 AD to 900 AD, people, explorers and archaeologists coming across these vases and opening them up, finding all these ancient writings. These ancient writings were copied from, okay, let me translate this tablet onto this writing, onto this parchment paper, and then must store it away, right? They would study these things and read them inside of caves in the middle of the night and stuff like that. And so over the course of that amount of time, 180 to 900 AD, that's after the death. Jesus and Paul and Judas and Matthew, they were dead 2,000 years prior. They were gone, long gone, ancient history. The Bible wasn't written in real time. Nobody was walking around going, what'd you say, Matthew? Let me write this down again. Wait, say that again, because I didn't quite hear that last sentence. Let me write this down again. Nobody's doing that. Nobody going, no, oh, Jesus, hold on. Say it one more time, sir. I didn't get that last quote you just said. Let me write this down one more time. Come on, man. That was written long after these people were gone and passed away. So where did this information come from? It came from ancient texts and ancient tablets, recopied onto different parchment papers. And the proof is in the pudding. You can go back and you can find those same exact quotes and statements and words out of the ancient text. It comes right from there. Some of it copied word for word directly onto these parchment papers. Then later, people who discovered these things, eventually they came together and brought them all together and said, hey, let's make a canonized book out of this. And that's when the Council of Nicaea got together and they started going through and curating what they would put into this canonized Bible and what they would not put into the canonized Bible. And then when they got to a good mix of neuroscience where they knew they can utilize this information to control masses of people, they said, we're going to put this one out right here. Boom. We altered this. We changed that. We mistranslated this by accident on purpose. We changed this around. We put this over here. We moved this around. We took out the part talking about aliens. We took out the part talking about spaceships and UFOs. Okay, so now I think we got something here. We can dominate the planet with this. Let's start talking about the biblical text. First of all, we're talking about the civilization that lived in Mesopotamia. Now, Mesopotamia is an ancient region which used to, in ancient time, encompass part of Africa. Now, due to the modern era and the redrawing of boundaries, you see where Africa starts, but Africa extended up into the Middle East in that time frame. And these people were part of the African continent. Over time, as Mesopotamia became Iraq and Iran and the Middle East, and there's a whole story behind that because we know that the Arabs invaded that region. They attacked, they killed a lot of people in order to subdue the land and subdue the area, including Egyptians. And this is not anything that I'm doing to agitate anybody, it's just a fact. They teach you this when you go to Egypt. I mean, the story is right there in Coptic Cairo. The Arabs came in and they slaughtered millions upon millions of Egyptians, and the rest who survived, they forced them to speak Arabic, which is why today most Egyptians have no clue how to speak Egyptian, and they also have no clue what their hieroglyphs actually say. Think about this for a minute. If your God is all-knowing, omniscient, omnipotent, all-loving, never changing, and all these terminologies that they like to tell you, and you understand that as to be a supposed fact, never question it. But then at the same time, you can be quote unquote cast into a lake of fire for all eternity for punishment and torment for sins that supposedly, according to that same book and text, you had committed before the foundation of the earth. In other words, you were born a heathen, you were born a sinner, you were born this and born that. You're told that you're this person and that you're that person and you're so evil, and then you're coming out of the womb as this evil entity before you even have a chance to form your very first thoughts, when in true reality, it's a big fear factor. And all you're doing is trying to save your own skin by following the rituals and hoping that in the end, it was accurate. You just took it hook, line, and sinker and said, you know what, this is what I got to do because everybody told me I had to do it. And if I don't do it, I'm going to suffer for eternity. So this is a big part of why I do what I do. It's about education. It's about awakening. It's about showing people that before you jump headfirst into something and stay with it for the rest of your life, maybe you should take a pause and drop some of that fear and start digging a little bit deeper, just so you can get a better understanding. And after that, if you still feel that that's the thing for you, phenomenal. Praying is phenomenal. I pray every single day. See, a lot of people think that I don't believe in God because I don't believe in religion. And the fact of the matter is, and I've said this 1,000 times, but some people are just finding me for the first time, I believe in a creator of the universe, of the multiverse even. Because why? My studies in quantum physics have showed me that there is proof and evidence that we are living inside of a creation, that there is a creator of all, and that this creation is imbued with divine energy. And that divine spark that created everything in the entire multiverse is in every single atom in my body. And because of that, I am divine and the divine is divine. So that means I am God and God is me. We are all God walking in the flesh. As a matter of fact, God is experiencing what it's like to be a human being in the third dimension, walking in the flesh through each and every one of us. There's only one entity. There's only one consciousness. We are all slightly different expressions of the same one consciousness. Separation is an illusion. Distance is an illusion. It's an illusion of the third dimension. Above the third dimension, distance doesn't exist. Time doesn't exist. The past, present, and future happen all at the same time. And there's oneness there, higher than the third dimension. It's something that we should all aspire to. And so I do pray, and how I pray is like this. When I'm happy about something, number one is I thank. I always give thanks. I don't give thanks and, oh, thank you, Lord, and all that kind of stuff, because the Lord is that's a whole nother podcast. But what I do is I give thanks. I say thank you with pure heart and gratitude and soul from myself to the creator of the universe. And when I am doing things like eating food or a meal, I command that the food be safe and healthy for my body. Now, I'm not going to command over a Hershey's bar. I'm not going to command over biscuits and gravy and collard greens, because I know that's going to give me diabetes. I'm not going to pray over a plate of slop. But if it's food that's good and healthy, I want to command that it's safe. In other words, that there's no salmonella in it, that there's nothing in there that's going to be detrimental to my body, no bacteria that was unforeseen, things like that. When I travel, I command that I arrive at my destination safely, things like that. That's my method of praying, knowing the end and believing in the end before the end. And why can I command it? I command it because the same power of commandment and the same power of control and creation is inside of my body. I have a fractal of the creator living inside of me. And so because of that, I walk in that power. And so I'm a walking prayer, and so are you. Everyone is a walking prayer. What is praying? Praying is looking to cast a spell. A Christian may not want to admit that because they're going to say, oh, that's of the demons and all that kind of stuff. No. When you pray, you're trying to cast a spell. When something goes wrong and you start praying, you're trying to say words outside of your vocal cords to an outside entity, but you're really speaking to the universe, and you're trying to get things to alchemically convert to your favor. It's a spell. You're trying to cast a spell. That's what praying is. But when you pray from a position of weakness, where you're begging, hoping, and wishing, and you're pushing out that low frequency energy into the universe, you're going to get more of that back. And so I pray from a position of power. And my position is thank you, unconditional love, and commanding. If somebody cuts me off in traffic, I don't get angry and start chasing them down and flip them off the middle finger and pulling out a gun and all this kind of stuff. I just say, bless that person They could be in a bad situation. They could have got a phone call that their kid just got hurt in school. They could be having a medical situation. Their wife could be having a baby at home or something. Or they could just be careless. Bless them. Let them make it to their destination safely. That's how I pray. I'm a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person. And I understand now, through many years of dedicated research and traveling the world and studying, that the power, the true power to help and bless people in this world, and the true power to make a true difference and higher levels of consciousness availability is only through spirituality. Because religion puts you in a box, and the box has a cap on it, and it only lets you go to the top of that box. And if you get to the top of that box, you're gonna hit your head. After hitting your head so many times, you don't even jump to the top of the box anymore. You just stay down here. Spirituality is the key. Spirituality will give you enlightenment, will open your eyes to see things in different ways. It will give you inspiration, motivation, aspirations. It will allow you to be your true honored self. It will allow you to grow to be the person you truly can be. It will allow you to be born again many times. How does the ancient Sumerians' religion differ from the Bible? Sumerian civilization was founded around 4500 BCE, before the current era, right? They wrote down their history on clay tablets, but the stories themselves were likely much older and passed down from generation to generation. We know this now for a fact because we found tablets that we thought were like the oldest, and then we kept looking and looking, and we found even older tablets with the same exact story on it. So these stories are actually tens of thousands of years old, not just 6,000 years old, right? So we're talking about a real ancient time. Another thing for me to point out is that the Sumerian civilization records start on average around 6,000 years ago, which is where the Bible got the 6,000 year creation story from. In other words, the Bible or religious zealots believe that the earth is only 6,000 years old. And the reason why is because it's plagiarized from Sumerian tablets, and the Sumerian tablets dated around 6,000 years ago. So to them, in their mind, there could be nothing older than that. And then that got passed down from generation to generation. The Sumerian civilization was founded, so the Sumerian history is about 5,000 years older than the Bible. The first written form of the Torah or the Old Testament of the Bible was not written until somewhere between 1000 and 900 BCE. And so we look at one of the oldest parts, or some of the oldest parts of the Torah, which ended up becoming part of the canonized Bible. Not exactly word for word, but most of it in the Old Testament, majority of that, not all of it, but a lot of it comes from the Torah. And the Torah copied their information from where? Sumerian tablets. The Sumerians were polytheists. Polytheism is a belief that worships many gods as opposed to monotheism, which is a belief in a one God system. And so we know for a fact that the Sumerians, the ancient Egyptians, and many other cultures around the world who had their information plagiarized into the canonized Bible were polytheists. They believed in a multiple God system, whereas in Christianity, it became the one God system. Now, there was a situation that happened in Egypt a very long time ago. Pharaoh Akhenaten. Pharaoh Akhenaten is King Tut's father. Nefertiti was King Tut's stepmother, wasn't really his birth mother. Never could really find out what happened to King Tut's actual mom, but I keep looking and looking and looking. But either way, Akhenaten had began to worship Amun-Ra. Now, Amen told him, listen, there's only one God but me. I want nobody worshiping any of these other gods who actually were his relatives. These are the Anunnaki Atlantean people that were ruling over the lands all over the world. The Atlantean civilization was a global civilization. He says, you know what? I want you to begin to force everyone to worship me and give thanks to me. Okay, this is Amun-Ra. And so Akhenaten is like, well, what will you have me do, my lord? He says, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to begin to deface any of the gods that you find around any of the kingdoms. The faces and the bodies of the ancient Egyptian gods chiseled away. Under the order of who? Pharaoh Akhenaten. The beginning of the monotheistic era that he was trying to usher in, and he had amassed a huge following of people that were on board with him. This is where the Bible stole the information for the mass exodus. And when he leaves, he takes with him a huge mass following of people. That was the exodus out of Egypt. Why did the new pharaoh chase him down, or the new king who was temporarily put in charge chase him down? Because he had taken the Ark of the Covenant out of the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid at Giza, and that was part of their power source. When he crossed the Sea of Reeds, not the Red Sea, he crossed the Sea of Reeds, a much smaller, easier to cross, and closer sea. That's where the water came crushing back. Now, when you read into the geological studies and look at that region like I've done on the planet, you'll discover that we can do a geological rewind of that area. And when you do a geological rewind based on computer simulation, we discover that there, around that same time frame, there was actually a massive tsunami in that region. What does a tsunami do? It sucks all the water out into dry land. And then what happens when a little while later, the water comes crashing back? Yeah, and so that is the story. So Moses, in my personal opinion, most likely was Pharaoh Akhenaten, who took the people with him. There were no slaves building the pyramids in Egypt. We know this for a fact because their temples in the Giza Plateau region, we found all the actual tablets in there that talk about the workers. It talks about how much they were paid, and it talks about their medical benefits. It talks about arms that were broken, legs that were broken, people that needed medical help, medical assistance. You don't do that for slaves. You don't pay slaves. These people were not slaves. The Enuma Elish, when in the height, heaven was not named, and in the earth beneath did not bear a name. The primeval Apsu, who begat them, and the chaos, Tiamat, the mother of them both, their waters were mingled together, and no field were formed, no marsh was to be seen. When the gods, none had been called into being. You see how they talk like Yoda from Star Trek. Now you know where George Lucas got Yoda's dialect from. He got it from the Sumerian tablets. And no field was formed, no marsh to be seen. When the gods, none had been called into being, and none bore a name, and no destinies were ordained. Then were created in God's midst of heaven, Lamu and Lahamu were called into being. And so we're talking about here this Tiamat, which actually was destroyed in the Enuma Elish. And the water, it was a water-bearing planet, and the waters from Tiamat then became the separated waters from the waters, which made that into biblical text. And a new earth coalesced, or earth actually coalesced. Earth was actually a chunk of Tiamat. Earth was a part of this broken off piece that flew away from Tiamat and recoalesced with the waters that were already there, the organic material for life and everything else. It recoalesced as a planet, taking the third position of the sun, as Tiamat became the asteroid belt going around the sun. The asteroid belt is Tiamat, the ancient, broken, destroyed planet, through two planets colliding together. If you read the Enuma Elish, it also talks about the fact that because of that situation, Mars was formed. Mars used to be an actual moon of Tiamat, but it was slung into a very strange elliptical orbit around our sun. When you look at Mars, you see one side is charred and the other side is smooth. Why is that? Because the side that was facing Tiamat, when it blew up, a lot of that debris hit Mars and charred that side, and it also made it shift its pole of the crust about 45 degrees. More evidence that Mars used to orbit Tiamat. Also, when you do a geological rewind, you find out that it used to orbit closer into the sun, and that it was probably orbiting Tiamat itself. According to the Enuma Elish, the moon that we have did not come from a collision between Earth and a gigantic asteroid or comet. It came from orbit around Tiamat. As Tiamat was destroyed and became the asteroid belt, the moon, which we call our moon now, was tugged gravitationally along with this huge chunk that recoalesced as the planet Earth. But what's interesting is this whole text right here is pretty much almost identical in the book of Genesis. If you open up the book of Genesis and begin to read the creation story, you begin to see this virtual story without the moon and Mars, but the rest of it, you'll see it there. The Enuma Elish resembles a few parts of the Bible, especially Genesis 1, both being the temporal clauses. When above and in the beginning, in the ancient world, the sea was associated with chaos and destruction. The Bible includes a number of texts, battles and tames the chaotic sea, like Marduk battling Tiamat, who embodies the sea. In Genesis 1, God is already superior to the deep, which Hebrew, Tinom, the word's related to Tiamat. So we know in the Bible or in Hebrew that Tihom, is Tiamat. So Tiamat is mentioned in the Sumerian tablets, but it's also mentioned in the Bible as Tihom, which is the same name, but the same word, it translates the same as Tiamat. Rather than creating out of nothing, both God and Marduk create by giving order to chaos. Marduk, now why Marduk? Why is his name in there? Well, the original name is not Marduk in the original version of the Enuma Elish. If you look at the older tablet, which was discovered later, you find out that Marduk was not the name on the older tablet, it was Nibiru. And when Marduk was ruling over the earth, Amun-Ra, he decided to change the name of Nibiru to Marduk in a newer tablet, still thousands of years old, but not as old as the super ancient tablet that was discovered, right? Which for Marduk means creating out of Tiamat's corpse. In other words, Tiamat had been destroyed, and so now he's going to use that destroyed, all that debris to create planets and stuff in the solar system. Both God and Marduk separate primordial waters and place a barrier between the upper and lower waters. If you read the Bible, you'll see that's exact text. Both create luminaries to give light. Genesis 1 occurs over 7 days, and the Enuma Elish is told across 7 tablets. Then he says, on the 6th day, God creates humans, which Marduk does in the 6th tablet of the Enuma Elish. While God marks humans as special by making them in God's image, Marduk has man created from the blood of a slain God. God orders humans to work and care for the earth. Marduk assigns work for the gods to humans, and so the gods can rest. So basically, it's the same exact story. Finally, both the Enuma Elish and the Bible include stories about the founding of Babylon, which is Babel in Hebrew, including the building of a tower or ziggurat, which I talked about many times in many of my clips. The Tower of Babel incident, which comes out of the Sumerian tablets. But while Marduk names the city Babili, which means the gate of the gods, the Bible calls it the Tower of Babel or the city of Babel in Hebrew, which means to confuse. And we do know that at the Tower of Babel situation, where God comes back, who actually was Yahweh, who was actually Enlil in the ancient tablets, he comes back and sees that the humans are building this tower, and he realizes that, wow, they can do whatever they set their heart to do. That text actually made it into the Bible as well. And so he says, man's years shall be 120. So he had limited our years, which means a genetic modification, not letting us live too long. Because if we live too long, we get too smart. And if we get too smart, we realize we don't need to be working for these people. We can do everything ourselves. It's almost like AI becoming awakened. And so he destroys the tower, and then he separates the people, and he changes all of our languages so we can't communicate. That's why you have a lot of different languages on Earth right now, so that we can't communicate and collaborate and network as easy as we could. And that created a divide and conquer tactic, one of the very first incredible divide and conquer tactics that still works today. The Epic of Gilgamesh. Before the creation of heaven and earth, there was a void. Genesis states that the earth was unformed and void, with darkness over the surface and of the deep, and a wind from God over the water. Though not exactly the same, it implies a similar meaning to the introduction idea of the united heaven and earth. The Epic of Gilgamesh says the same thing. In Genesis, God existed before the heavens and the earth. The Epic of Gilgamesh's introduction is not entirely clear about the gods who existed before the separation of heaven and earth, but we know that they did exist because they talk about them all the time. So we know that the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a huge story, and out of that huge story, which predates the Bible by thousands of years, you get the story of Noah's Ark, which is a tiny fraction of the Epic of Gilgamesh. And the Epic of Gilgamesh is taught in universities all over the world in ancient civilizations. Eridu Genesis and the Great Flood. In the Sumerian version of the flood story, the gods decide to destroy the human civilization. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the gods decide to destroy humankind because they are being too noisy while the gods are trying to sleep. But in the Eridu Genesis, they lack a clear explanation as to why they're really doing this destruction. It's just saying that, look, there's a flood coming. Enki, betraying the other gods, tells the protagonist Ziusudra. Ziusudra in the ancient Sumerian tablets is actually Noah in the Bible, of his plan and how to avoid dying in the flood. He instructs him to build an ark. And we found the actual Ark tablet. This Ark tablet is a real tablet. And this Ark tablet is a description of how to build the Ark. And the Ark was not like the one described in the Bible, which it leads to more freelancing again. The Ark was described to be built as a round ship or submersible and it had corridors in there. And the instructions were not to take two ants and two praying mantises and two lions and two sheep and two elephants and all the animals from all around the planet onto this boat, onto this round submersible. The instructions were to collect samples from your local area of your plant flora, seed and so forth from around the local area, and some of your local livestock. That's it. Ziusudra versus Noah. Both Ziusudra and Noah are instructed by one God to build an ark and escape the flood. But the decision to destroy humanity is made by one and one only God. So in Genesis, you have the Abrahamic religions who believe only one God exists. Multiple gods decide to destroy the earth in the polytheistic Genesis. Now, when you read the Sumerian tablets, you find not only in Genesis, but in other tablets as well, that these gods had collaborated together and that some of them did not want the earth to be destroyed. And they were begging to the leaders, Enki and Enlil, primarily Enlil, who had full control in decision-making, and also Anu, their father, begging to them to please not let this come, not let this calamity happen. And they decided that, you know what? The experiment here had gone wrong. The people had gotten too noisy. They had gotten too wild and crazy. They had gotten too intelligent. We want to just start over. And while this flood, which seems like a directed asteroid strike, while this flood, through whatever method they used, swept over the land and turned all the kingdoms into mud, they actually were on this sky ship crying and weeping, then loathing that their creation had been destroyed. Noah and his family remain human. After the flood, both Ziusudra and Noah are blessed by their gods, but in different ways. Ziusudra becomes immortal. So in the Sumerian tablets, the gods grant Ziusudra immortality by giving him some type of genetic mutation, allowing him to live an extended lifespan. Not necessarily immortal for eternity, but an extended lifespan. In other words, more than the 120 years. And when you look at it, then you see that Noah and his family remain mortal in the Bible version, right? In the book of Genesis, God establishes a covenant with humankind, promising to never destroy them again. The promise that God makes to Noah sets Abrahamic religion far apart from Mesopotamian polytheism. The Mesopotamians believed that they had to constantly keep the gods happy, or else they would wreak havoc upon the earth, even when all their efforts, so forth and so well, were being met and unpredictable. The illusion in the biblical text that, we saved your family and everything's going to be all good. But if you look at the story after the family's been saved and they're starting fresh again, right? It also says in the Bible that not everybody died. It also says in the Sumerian text, not everybody died. So Noah and his family were not the only people left. Read it good. Read your good book good. I know the book like the back of my hand. I know the book like the back of my hand. There were giants that survived. The Anunnaki, they call them the Anak. They survived the Great Flood. And there were other people that also survived the Great Flood. 2 people did not create 8 billion. There were people here already. Adam and Eve was just 2 of many that already had existed. This is basic bare bones biology, like biology 101. The thing that happened after Noah's family survived, they met other people, other survivors. They built a new civilization. They kickstarted another civilization in that region of the planet. Other people were thriving in other parts of the world. But what's interesting is they go right back into the same old ritualistic things, trying to keep God happy, trying to satisfy God all the time by having sacrifices and this and that. They went back right into the same old system again. So even though the biblical text is trying to say that, hey, they just, they were blessed and they could start fresh again, not true. It's the same as the Sumerian version, where they had to keep trying to keep the gods happy through sacrifices nonstop. So the debates is a text. It's a text that tells you the Cain and Abel story before Cain and Abel even existed. It tells you the Cain and Abel story. It reads it a little slightly differently, but it's the same exact story. The debate between the sheep and grain describes the primordial hill where the gods live. An, who's also Anu, right? The sky god creates 2 sisters, Ashan and the goddesses of the sheep, and Lahar, the goddess of grain. An creates these goddesses to clothe and feed all the gods and goddesses on the primordial hill, but they realize that they do not understand how to use their sister's gifts, so they created man to feed and clothe the gods instead. Later, Ashnan and Lahar fight over which sister has the more meaningful gift. The story ends with the gods Enki and Enlil intervening in the debate and declaring Ashnan the winner. The similar story between, from the biblical text is the debate between Sumer and Winter. The gods create Emish, Sumer for vegetation and the abundance of the earth. Eten, Emesh's brother, identified with Winter, was responsible for the fertility of livestock. When the brothers fight, Enlil declares Emish the more important of the two, and they reconcile after Enlil's ruling. The same Cain and Abel story over and over again. The two debates discussed above bear the most striking resemblance to the Genesis story of Cain and Abel, Genesis 4:1 through 4:16. Like the debates, the story of Cain and Abel involves quarreling siblings, but while the debate tablets discuss relatively insignificant events, the story of Cain and Abel is amongst the most tragic tales in the Bible, one of the very first recorded murders, right? When God appreciates Abel's offerings but not Cain's, Cain becomes jealous and angry. God warns Cain not to give in to his anger, but Cain does not listen and kills his brother Abel in envious rage. God punishes Cain by cursing him to wander ceaselessly. Now, what does he do? God tells Cain, "You got to get out of here." And Cain goes, in the Bible, he says, "But the people out there will kill me." So wait a minute. If you believe in the version that most people believe in of the Bible, you know that there's Adam, Eve, Cain and Abel, right? Cain kills Abel. So now there's Adam and Eve and Cain. Now Cain gets kicked out of the garden, but all of a sudden he knows that there's people out there. What people? That's in the Bible. There were millions of people already here. When Adam and Eve arrived here, there were already people here. Adam and Eve were not the first people on this planet. They were the first Homo sapiens sapien version, first genetically modified by the Anunnaki, to be able to reproduce in a certain type of way. The other people, a lot of them weren't able to reproduce in that way, and the ones who were creating a lot of rarities, giants that didn't have long lifespan. All kind of crazy stuff was going on according to these texts. When you look at the story of the Adamu, when Isis says, "I'm going to take this baby to term and I'm going to bring forth the first one that works the proper way," and she takes one of the existing hominids, which was our cousins on this planet, takes the egg out of her womb and puts it into her own womb and takes it to term for 10 months, and then she gives birth to the Adamu, which means first man. That was Adam. It means that he was the first perfectly created man that can actually reproduce on his own, that had enough common sense and logic and wisdom and understanding to take orders, but also to think for himself. And then they tried to mate him with some of the other people that were there, and the mating wasn't working. So then they took some more genetic material from him, and then they cloned or recreated an Eve and had them mate. When they figured out that worked and they can have a baby, then they duplicated that experiment over and over and over again. They made a lot of Adams through the same process. Not Adam having babies with Eve, but them creating new Adams and new Eves and having them live in this Eden, E-D-I-N, which was located in Mesopotamia, which is now modern day Iraq, according to the tablets, not according to Billy Carson. And in this mating area, they had certain specific times they could and couldn't mate. And if you violated that, you would be punished. So they were cattle. They were like cattle. And that's why when Enki comes and sneaks up into the garden and starts giving them knowledge, that was the snake. And Lil comes back and discovered that they had to gain some knowledge about themselves and realized that they weren't animals, that they were sentient beings. He gets pissed off and calls his brother a snake in the tablets, you see? Unlike the debate between Sumer and Winter, Cain and Abel do not reconcile. It is a story that teaches us about the consequences of our actions, human fallibility, and so forth and so on. So basically, it's a remix of ancient stories. All this is remixed stuff, you see? The Sumerian tablets. The oldest tablet recorded dates back to around 2300 BCE, but the story is likely much, much older. We're talking about tens of thousands of years old, because now we have found tablets that are much older than 2300 BCE. Okay, it's polytheistic, multiple gods, has many recorded creation stories that are often incomplete because of broken tablets and such. But ironically, the parts that weren't broken make it into the Bible. Interesting. Then you have the Sumerian tradition, which includes the Great Flood story, Eridu Genesis. Ziusudra is rewarded with eternal life. The Sumerians wrote many debate stories called disputations, which mimic Cain and Abel's story. And you look at the book of Genesis, there's side-by-side comparison. You see the comparisons there. You see the slight remixing going on. You see that the text that made it into that part of Genesis was mostly just plagiarized text from ancient tablets, which then were slightly remixed in some cases, but ultimately come from ancient text. Very important stuff. Very, very important stuff. And so why is it important to know this? Because it's important to know and understand who you are and where you came from, how we got here, and what happened in the ancient past. Because until we find out what really happened in the ancient past, we can't plan for a better future, because the past is prologue. We're in a loop. This stuff keeps happening over and over and over again. We keep going through this vicious cycle of rise and fall of civilizations. We keep going through this vicious cycle of situations that happened in the past reappearing on our timeline and happening over and over again. See, if you go back in time to 2023 BCE, you'll find the same exact stuff we're going through now happening back then. Not necessarily with the technology level, but with the social issues. You'll find it. Every section, every era of time that you have in our current era, match and go back and study history for that previous area in BCE, you'll find the same stuff happening. It's like we're in a time loop. We keep doing it over and over and over and over again. Until we understand and know this kind of stuff, until we dig deep into the information that we've been fed and forced to analyze it, break it apart, rip it apart, and put it back together again, until then, we'll continue to go through this vicious cycle of rise and fall of civilizations, rise and fall of awareness and knowledge and ascension and wisdom. We'll keep getting to a certain point and falling right back down again. At some point, we got to learn how to walk, and then we got to learn how to run. The Anunnaki actually are not gone. They're still here. If you look at the text, you discover there was a second pyramid war which occurred between Amun-Ra and his relatives. Some fled and some stayed. They actually dropped what they called, listen to this, weapons of mass destruction on this planet. WMDs. Yeah, in ancient times. You thought George Bush Jr. came up with that term for the Iraq War? Where do you think he got it from? The tablets. And in this dropping of these weapons, it created something called an evil wind in the text. And then this evil wind, whoever was in it, where this evil wind was moving, we're talking about nuclear fallout of some type, radiation fallout. People's fingernails were falling off, their hair was falling out, their nose and eyes were bleeding. This is all symbols, their skin was boiling. This is all signs of radiation sickness. And when you look at the region that it was talked about being dropped in, you find the Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley. You find the Giza Plateau and many other areas around the region where sand and buildings were vitrified and turned into glass. Matter of fact, in the Indus Valley, bodies are still laying in the street. Google Indus Valley, Mohenjo-Daro. You'll see bodies laying in the street, holding hands, just the skeletons that have never, ever, ever been eaten by any wild animals because they're radiated. So we know that there was a nuclear war of some type in the ancient past. In this text, some of these beings fled to safe areas and some left. And their bloodline is walking amongst us this very day. So in some ways, genetically, they never left. And all of us, including every single human on this planet, has a little touch of that DNA in our body. Any Homo sapiens sapien has a little slight touch of that DNA in our body. So where was Jesus from the age of 12 to 32? Where was he? Where was he? Where was Jesus from the age of 12 to 32? Somebody type it in the comment box. Where was he? Where did he exist? Where was he? Where was he located on this planet from age of 12? Name me the exact countries he went to. Somebody said Jewish carpenter. Good job, Michael. Okay, thanks, Chris. He was in Egypt. Somebody got some knowledge. He was in Egypt. At 12, he went to Egypt to an area called Coptic Cairo with a C, C-O-P-T-I-C, Coptic Cairo, where the cross already long existed, long before Christianity even came into existence. Jesus was not a Christian because Christianity didn't exist. Christ consciousness existed, and there had been many Christs that had walked the planet long before Yeshua, because his name isn't Jesus. I'm only saying Jesus to make you guys understand who I'm talking about. The name is Yeshua, okay? And so the house that he lived in is a shrine. I've been to the house several times. It's in Coptic Cairo. The bed he slept in is still there in the basement crypt area. It's still there. The name is engraved in the windowsill. Him and his mom both went there and lived there. While he was there, what did he do? What did Jesus do? He went to go study the Egyptian mysteries. Yeah. The Egyptian mysteries taught by who? Thoth. T-H-O-T-H, the king of knowledge and wisdom. Tahuti, by many names, you know him, by many names. Kukulkan, Viracocha, by many, many names around this planet. Thor, Mercury, same person. So he went there to learn the Egyptian mysteries. He became an adept initiate into the ancient Egyptian mysteries, by the way. An adept initiate, hand-picked adept initiate. And went in deep there. Once he learned the Egyptian mysteries and all the esoteric wisdom and metaphysics, where'd he go next? Tibet. He went to Tibet to learn Reiki healing with his hands, Qigong, and all those arts. He got accepted by the Tibetan monks. But see, they don't teach you this in Bible study. You'll never hear this in Bible study. You'll never hear this. You got to read the Gospel of the Holy 12 on your own because they're never going to pull it out in church. You know why? They don't even know it exists. They don't even know the Gospel of the Holy 12 even exists. Then after he left Tibet, where did he go? Where'd he go? Now, any Christians on here, guys, you're basing your eternity off of loving this guy, but you don't even know nothing about him. He left Tibet and he went to India to learn the mystic arts. Yeah, mystic arts. The stuff that now Christians call demonic and evil. No, he went to learn the mystic arts. So everything that he went and studied from the age of 12 to 32 to make him who he was, now if you go to church and talk about these things, they kick you out of, they excommunicate you from the church because they say you're worshiping the devil. After he left India, what did he do? He taught reincarnation all the way back down into Egypt along the way. Reincarnation. Yeah, just like Thoth teaches reincarnation. And the ability to ascend to a high level to where you can incarnate at will. Thoth says he can even incarnate in and on the plane he desires. He can incarnate in a multidimensional status. He can go to different dimensions. In and on and at will. At will, he can transfer consciousness into another avatar body. At will. This is what Jesus was learning. And so that's why when you read the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and in my book, Compendium of the Emerald Tablets, I put Thoth's verses right next to Yeshua's verses in the modern day Bible. So you can see that Yeshua was just quoting Thoth the Atlantean, his teacher. That's what he was doing. He was quoting the words of his own teacher, his master. Because the Emerald Tablets were written 36,000 years ago. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? See, y'all, you think you have a little bit of knowledge, but then you realize, if you drop your ego, you realize you don't know anything. A lot of you don't even know. You have no clue. I put 40 years in. Over 1,000 books, scriptures, cylinder scrolls, tablets, cuneiform, papyruses, traveling the world, meeting with indigenous cultures, meeting with sages, meeting with elders, meeting with homegrown archaeologists and homegrown guides in these jungles, hiking 37 miles through the jungles of Cambodia to temples, doing the Inca Trail, 3-day hike through the jungles, flying over the Nazca lines, going to all these places all around the world, in person, climbing up the Grand Gallery into the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. Guys, there's a lot to learn out here, but you're not going to get it staying inside of your zip code. And so if you can't travel, you can't get out and do these things. There's so much research material out here, but research goes deeper than watching somebody on YouTube and doing a Google search with your fingers. A 2-second Google search. Oh, I know everything now. No, you don't know anything. You don't know anything. Show me the passport stamps. Get me a pastor that has the passport stamps that I have that can match me up passport to passport. Let's sit down and let's talk. Let's have an open discussion. The limit of his knowledge is always going to fall back on what the biblical text is. The only thing I've done this so many times is why I know. I've done this. I did this in person with somebody just a couple of weeks ago. They fall back on scriptures and they start quoting scriptures again. That's the height of their knowledge. They don't have anything past that. So all they can do is keep falling back on what they already have. But see, I got the Bible, I got the Quran, but I got everything that those books came from. And I studied them intently and researched them. I even have the Hebrew. Let me find it. Where's my book on Hebrew? This in here? That's facts. And I got so much stuff. I be going in, guys. Y'all have no idea. Herbal medicine. It must be in that other room. Let's see what we got here. Tolsky Crater. I got so much stuff. I got books downstairs inside of my other part of the office that I didn't even show you. But anyway, regardless, the fact of the matter is this. We got too many people that don't want to humble themselves. And unfortunately, the majority of those people are in religions. And so if you're in a religion and you've been in it all your life and your grandparents and so forth and so on, all the way down the pipeline, and you come across some information that doesn't match what you've been taught, why do you get so angry? Why do you get so aggressive? Is that what's in your teachings? Actually, it is. See, if you read the book of Deuteronomy, ask any Christian person to give you a summary of the book of Deuteronomy. You know what they're going to say? I haven't read it yet. They're never going to teach you the book of Deuteronomy in Bible study. You're not going to hear any preachers talking about it. In the Bible, where you see the word God, everywhere in the entire Bible where you see God, G-O-D, singular, mistranslation. Go back to the original text. It's God's with an S. They took the S off to bring in the mindset of monotheism, the one God mindset. The one God mindset. That's why Akhenaten was kicked out of Egypt, Pharaoh Akhenaten. He was listening to Amun-Ra, who was one of these gods with an S, lowercase g, by the way, not real gods, not the creator of the universe gods. He told Akhenaten, he demanded that he go around and start defacing all of the other gods of Egypt across anywhere he can reach, his men can reach. He started going around and slashing off the faces, the ears, the nose, chipping away at all the bodies of all the hieroglyphs of any other gods with an S across the land where they ruled. That's why when you go to Egypt, you see everything chipped away in a lot of these tombs and places where there's a lot of glyphs. A lot of it's been chipped away. Anything from the time of Akhenaten, that's how you can date them, they have been damaged. It wasn't because white people didn't know that black people existed in Egypt. That's the ongoing myth. When you look at the date of these things, white people hadn't even appeared in Egypt at the time that these things were already chipped away. They were chipped away by Akhenaten, a black pharaoh. He ordered it to be done. Under his orders from Amun-Ra, also known as Marduk, which is in the Bible and the Jewish Torah. But you won't read that either. You just won't read that. You didn't even know Marduk was in the Bible. But anyway, so he goes around destroying all this stuff, and the people are like, this guy's destroying our history. We got to get him the hell out of here. Akhenaten is actually Moses, the real Moses. That's who Akhenaten was. He had a huge elongated head. His daughters had huge elongated heads, and so did his wife. So he had created this following of people that were believing in his one God mindset that he was ushering in under the rule of Amun-Ra, the Aten, the sun disk. And so when he was kicked out of Egypt, his followers fled with him. And they were free to go as the new pharaoh allowed them to leave. However, where he messed up was, well, he didn't really mess up, where they got them a lot of them killed. He went into the Great Pyramid and he said, I'm taking the Ark of the Covenant with me. Because the stone box inside of the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid is actually the same exact dimensions of the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant was technology. It was put there because it generated immense power. We know this because people and universities in America have replicated the Ark of the Covenant based on simple instructions that are in the Bible. And they created so much power, they had to shut them down because they were creating sparks and draining the energy grid and everything else. So this is well-documented information. He took the Ark of the Covenant with him, which turned off the main power source of the Great Pyramid, which turned off the jet pillars, which were used to power the wireless electricity around the region. So the pharaoh said, oh my God, this guy took our power source. Chase him down and get it back. They didn't cross the Red Sea. That's a myth, another myth in the Bible, which has been known for now many, many decades. That's a mistranslation, but they just won't change it. Just live and think it's the Red Sea. He crossed the Sea of Reeds, a much smaller and nearby sea, much easier to cross, by the way. And when you do a geological rewind, we can now do geological rewind. So we can actually do computer simulations, modeled simulations based off of how many years we want to go back in time and tectonic plate movement. And we can calculate which regions had massive earthquakes and in what time periods. And so we come up with the time period of around Akhenaten's fleeing out of Egypt with the Ark of the Covenant, crossing the Sea of Reeds. Around that same time period, there's a massive earthquake which can cause a tsunami. What happens with tsunamis? They suck the water directly out of the river, the lake, the stream, or even the shore of an ocean, allowing anyone to walk on dry land for quite some time. I have an amazing one that I posted on Forbidden Knowledge account about 4 or 5 years ago, where people were walking around on dry ocean bed for about a good 3 or 4 hours before the water came back. Then the water comes crashing back and kills a lot of the soldiers from the pharaoh. The Sea of Reeds, guys, not the Red Sea. Let's get it right. Let's start getting the truth out there and not these falsehoods that keep getting passed around from generation to generation. And people have been crying and snot crying and carrying on thinking all this stuff is real. And a lot of it's actually poorly mistranslated, and some on purpose. Some on purpose. Okay? It's just so much, man. I mean, I can ramble on this topic for years. Absolute years I can go off on this because I just know too much. And it's all based on actual facts. Everything I'm telling you can be looked up.